Hey friends, what's up? Welcome to part two of this webinar series. I'm Ethan Sawyer. This is Tom Campbell. You'll meet us more in just a minute, but we heart you and we are glad you're here. What's great about your life this week? That's what we're asking. You can feel free to put it in the chat, or if you're watching this in the future, hopefully the future is awesome, and you can think about what is great about my life this week. Um, but let me just give you a sense of actually, I'm just gonna like straight up jump into the intro. Tom, will you slides us here? And
Absolutely.
thanks for slidesing us. As we mentioned on Tuesday, this is going to be focused on pretty much all the parts of the college application that are not the personal statement. So if you have personal statement questions, you can ask them, but we're probably going to prize questions that are not personal statement related. I'm going to be in the chat for a lot of today, doing the just basically answering questions. Tom's going to be the one doing the main presenting today, and here's our fancy, cool slide that Tom put together. Oh, no, that's just Tom's desktop. Sorry. There we go. Oh, we're almost there.
Well, so with Zoom these days, it sometimes randomly gives me the tab to use, and a lot of
There
times
we
it
go.
doesn't. So now
Awesome.
you got my full screen.
Great. So just a few housekeeping items as we think about this. Yes, the session's being recorded, as you'll soon see when you get the email follow-up. You can get auto-generated captions. That's a Zoom feature. We've got a survey and a giveaway at the end. So Rebecca or John, one of our awesome moderators today, shout out, is going to put a survey in the chat. That's how you get in the giveaway. So we're going to give away three things. One, we're going to give away three copies of one of my books. We're going to give away two free entries to my course, my summer course, which is a $450 value, which I'm excited to tell you all about later. And then we're also going to give away some AirPods. But you have to enter the questions in the forum in order to get a chance to win those. Besides that, I'm Ethan. I use he, him pronouns. This is a photo here of me with my wife and daughter. I've written some books on this. I've been doing this basically for the last 20 years. I took a break for grad school, speaking, teaching, writing, counseling. We do give away a lot of free resources on our website. That's probably why you're here. I moved around a bunch as a kid, and I'm really just happy to be here. Tom, you want to do your intro?
I'm Tom. I also moved around a lot as a kid. I moved twice from Bevier Street to Trafton Road in Springfield, Massachusetts. So a lot is a relative term. So prior to coming and working at college as a guy with Ethan, I worked in college admissions for a total of 6 years at College of the Holy Cross, which is my alma mater, and Pomona College, which is one of the Claremont colleges in Southern California. Both of them are more selective liberal arts colleges. Holy Cross, when I was there, had an admit rate of about 35%. And Pomona College's admit rate was about 7%. So I really got to see kind of two different institutions with different institutional priorities and processes. That is a theme for today's session. So if you don't know what I'm talking about, you will very soon. And I really like sharing that behind the scenes, behind the desk, current knowledge about college admissions with the masses. So I'm really, really glad you're here, and I'm glad we have such a great turnout. I also used to work as a college counselor in a high school. So shout out to the school counselors out there. If any of you are on the session, we know you are in the trenches doing the work, dealing with updates to policies and Common App and the world on a daily basis. So we're so, so glad if you are here. And of course, to all the students and families, we are glad you're here as well. And we hope you get a lot out of this session today.
We give away a lot of free stuff on the website. If you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, smash that like button. Um, you can if you want. I mean, we like Tom and I put out videos almost weekly. And so yeah, and that's if you're kind of like, what should I be thinking about when? That's a pretty good thing to check because we've got lots there. We've also got a podcast that we co-host. And right now, the big thing that we're in is we've been talking about AI, but right now we're talking about what colleges want. So we're in the middle of a series with admission officers on that. And counselors, you know this already, but we love you so much. We've got lots and lots of resources. Pretty much anything you can Google related to the admission process, and there's some kind of resource that we've created. We're on the Instagram, and if anybody else is still on Facebook, we're still there. Just holding out for, I don't know, because some people are on there, I suppose. We have an awesome program called the Matchlighter Scholarship. If you're interested in if you're a low-income student and you're interested in like free one-on-one support, we've got an incredible volunteer community. Some of you might, Matchlighters counselors might be on this call. Thank you. And you can feel free to apply through just collegeessayguy.com/matchletters. College Essay Guy separately does one-on-one support with students, for money. But if you're like, oh, I can't afford that, then we just love to support. There's so many amazing counselors out there. And don't wait. Like you can get matched really soon and get started this summer, which is like a strong recommend from our side. In terms of like the our live sessions, we've got a link, we've got a thing here, and we'll put this in the slides, the follow-up slides. But if you look at this, you'll see that we've got our webinar of upcoming events, and this is our page that's collegeessayguy.com/webinars-live-events. And you can like basically click a button and have the stuff added to your Google Calendar, or your Apple Calendar. It's really easy, and it's something that not a lot of people know about, but it's really easy to add. So anyway, that's there as well. The things we're going to talk about today, we're going to start off. Tom's going to talk about what colleges look for and how we even figure that out. We're going to talk about essentially what are the other elements of the application, and then we're going to get into some specifics, tips for the activities list, the additional information section, which was updated this year, supplemental essays. We're going to look a little bit at a sample successful application if we've got time. And then I'm going to spend a few minutes right around the 45 to 50-minute mark to tell you about our summer courses that are coming up that I'm super excited to have y'all join, hopefully. They're pay what you can, which is great. And then we'll get to the giveaways. And Q&A is going to be happening pretty much throughout. So I'm going to kick it over to Tom here, and I'm going to be answering questions and I'm going to do my best to answer the questions that I think most people will be wondering about. So Tom, with that, over to you.
Awesome. Thanks, Ethan.
Yeah.
So, just wanted to ground you all with a little bit of kind of like, all right, the college process. There are a lot of elements that go into it, and many of those elements you can see on your screen here, right? So, as everyone knows, college admissions is not a one size fits all. Not every college has the same way that they evaluate applicants. And colleges take into account multiple different components in your application. It's not just the personal statement. It's not just your GPA. This is a big misconception. Students think like, I need to have a high GPA. But remember, your GPA is not read in a vacuum. College admissions officers look at the type of high school you attend, what type of challenging courses are available there, how many of those courses did you take, and did you leave on the table? So there's a lot of kind of holistic review is the term that's often used by admissions officers when they're describing what this looks like. And sometimes it's really valuable, especially because it's really easy to have an overinflated sense of how much certain things matter. And I'm really big on having students prioritize what they can control at this stage in the process. So I imagine that many of you, if we were to look at the live session survey results, which if you haven't done it, you should do it now so you can be in the running for free courses and AirPods. Ding, ding, ding. For those of you who just joined, it's in the chat. But if you were filling that out, I would imagine that most of you attending this webinar, over 700 of you, almost 800, are probably high school juniors. And many of the things that you're probably seeing on this screen are things that you don't really have as much control over at this stage. You can't go back and turn back time. It's a share reference. She's before my time and yours. But you can't go back and do that when you are approaching your senior year. What you can do is focus on what you can control. And this chart is basically, it is a distillation of 185 different colleges of all different sizes, types, selectivity. And they were basically asked by the National Association for College Admission Counseling, which is a big professional organization that includes colleges and includes high schools. And this organization, they asked all these colleges, what are the most important components of your application process? And as you can see from this chart, most of the things, especially things higher up at the list that are considerably important, are those academic areas. Your GPA, the total, your GPA, and the strength of your high school curriculum, meaning what types of courses did you take? Did you take English, math, social studies, science, language, the majority of your high school experience? Those are the types of things that most colleges are looking for, and that will be your foot in the door of the admission process at pretty much any college that's on your list. A lot of these other things, though, things like, for example, extracurricular activities, you can't really go and, first of all, as you can see, they're considerably important to 6.5% of the colleges polled. So that's, I think, again, just some like recalibration and some resetting of expectations, because I'm on Reddit, I'm on College Confidential. I see y'all being like, I need to have better extracurriculars. I'm going to go try to start this thing tomorrow and have it reach 10,000 students. that is mathematically not that likely. And of course, I'm all about the effort and initiative, and you should go and control and do what you can with your summer and with your senior year. But most of your kind of resume and your transcript are ready to go. They're not really changing at this point. There are some things that you notice kind of on this chart that are things that you have a little more control over at this stage. Many of you are probably wrapping up your junior year. Of course, many of you wrote that one of the things you're most excited for is ending school. And something to be thinking about, for when you enter senior year is what teachers do you want to be writing your recommendation letters? So when you're thinking about things like that, you do have a little bit of control over this part of the process because you can choose who you want to ask. But you're not actually writing the letter yourself. You're equipping the teachers and counselors with notes, experiences, tidbits, takeaways from their classes, projects that really kind of stood out to you or really kind of light bulb moments for you in terms of mastering the class material. What type of student were you in the classroom? Were you a collaborator? Were you an initiator? Were you a big picture thinker? If you attended last week or our session on Tuesday, you learned a lot about roles and identities and how those can take shape in the college process. The same goes for things like recommendation letters, equipping your teachers and your counselors with as much juice, as much meat. I'm giving a vegan answer and a non-vegan answer, as much stuff to help them advocate for you. I used to write recommendation letters for students when I was a school counselor. And I'm telling you, if you're giving them one-word answers of like, your class was cool, that's not giving them as much as you would want them to include in the letter. So the more you're helping them out, the more they can help you out. But in the end, you're not the one actually writing the letter. So you only have a little bit of control there. These are the areas you have the most control over. Showcasing your positive character attributes, writing great, standout, distinctive essays that help are an additive component to your candidacy. They're helping you make a case for yourself among students who may have similar academic backgrounds and courses and success when it comes to extracurriculars and whatnot. Another thing that we're not really going to cover in this session, but I just want to plant a little seed for, is your interest in attending. So this is called demonstrated interest. We have lots of different blog guides and resources on what this means, but essentially it's how interested are you in the colleges that you're looking at? And you can go and look and see whether or not the colleges that are on your list actually care about that. Because there are some schools that don't really care how interested you are. They know they're hot and popular and rich. I'm looking at some of these elite, highly rejected schools. So they're not as concerned with that. There are other colleges, though, that want to make sure that you are actually genuinely interested in their school. So doing tours, information sessions, emailing your regional admission officer, all of those components are things that can really help you stand out. But today's session is really going to focus more on the written components of your application. And since the first session on Tuesday was all about the personal statement, the rest of the application is going to be what I'm diving into today. So this is just a plug for our podcast series. We did an amazing series last year called What Colleges Want. And it really is basically us going back to this report that I just showed and going through all of the different components that are on here. So I really recommend, again, we're going to be sharing the slides out at the end of this webinar. So you can feel free to, of course, just go to collegeSAguy.com/podcast. All of them are on there, but they all really dive into a lot of the questions that many of you are probably asking Ethan in the Q&A right now. So I really want to just point that out there as a resource for you once this webinar is over. And as you can see, it's really robust. Demonstrated interest, recommendation letters, extracurriculars, standardized testing, all those components that we're not covering today in this session, but I know you have questions around. So something else that you probably are aware of now if you attended the Tuesday session, if you haven't, you're getting a little crash course now, is a concept called admission nutrients. So remember when I talked about those elusive positive character attributes that are listed on this data sheet? 28% of colleges say that they're considerably important in their admission process, and 37% say they're moderately important. So it's pretty clear that colleges don't just care that you're smart and hardworking through your courses. They also want to know that you're going to be a valuable community member. Because in the United States, most colleges are residential colleges where, of course, there are commuter options, but the kind of default culture in the US higher education system is that many students live and learn on their campus. And even if they're not living in the dorms and residence halls, they're still engaging in extracurriculars. They're still connecting with peers outside of classes. So these 5 admission nutrients are ones that we really encourage you to think about including somewhere in your application. I want you to think of so intellectual curiosity, service to others and or community impact, collaboration, leadership and or initiative, and consistent engagement are the 5 qualities. Now, again, this is not like Lord of the Rings, and it's not like these are the 5 qualities to rule them all. Colleges have distinctive mission statements, value statements, strategic plans. And as you put together your college list, it's a really good idea to go and look at some of those pages on their admission websites. They often tell you what we look for in applicants. Colleges like Swarthmore, for example, they have a whole page that lists out the valued qualities that they're looking for in students. Where I worked at, Pomona, we had the same thing. We had a list of, here are all the qualities that we're looking for in our students. And as an admissions reader, I actually had to mark things like probing inquiry and creative learning and commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion. These are things that we actually actively looked for in student applications and had to mark and rate essentially where we were seeing that in a student's file across all those different components. So these things don't need to be in every single thing that you write. They don't need to be in all these things don't need to be in your personal statement. They don't all need to be in your supplemental essays, but you want to think of your application as a highlight reel. You want to think of it as a book versus a chapter. And as you may have gathered from the session on Tuesday, by the way, if you haven't seen it, there is a recording on our YouTube channel. So smash that like button and you'll be caught up in no time. Well, not no time, 45 minutes. But with your personal statement, your job really, your main job, the thing that you want to think about doing is to make sure that your values and identities, insights, AKA so what, light bulb epiphanies and moments in your life, a little more vulnerability ideally. So, maybe sharing things that are not this, I'm a perfect person and I've never had any qualm with my life. That is an unrealistic narrative. And that as an admissions reader does not really make me motivated to advocate for you. So with your personal statement, those 4 qualities there, craft means basically you're putting together a thoughtful story. It shows intention, it shows thoroughness. It's not just sloppily put together the day before. Those 4 qualities are what you want your personal statement to focus on. And that's a good way to kind of ask yourself when you're done with it, is my personal statement doing its job? You can include maybe some of the admission nutrients that you see on the screen here in your personal statement, but they can also be garnered from your recommendation letters, from your activities list. So just think about kind of, hey, maybe, my activities don't showcase as much collaboration, and an admission officer looking at my activities list might not have as much evidence that I work with different groups of students and people on projects. I know how to get along with other people. I know the value and other people's backgrounds, experiences, opinions that creates for better work in the end. You might want to include some qualitative stories about that in your actual writing, since maybe you have more individual, so I don't want to say solitary, but maybe you don't have as much like team activities on your activities list. That might be that kind of judgment call to have collaboration be a little more explicitly mentioned in some written form. This is just to let you know that we actually did an analysis. We've been doing a lot of like interesting data analysis on previous students who have worked with us one-on-one at College Essay Guy. So in addition to courses and webinars like these, we work with students one-on-one on their essays and applications, both through the Matchlighter Scholars program that Ethan mentioned at the beginning, which is for low-income students, free individual college counseling, as well as a paid program. And it's a one-for-one model. So for every paying student, we also take on a Matchlighter student, same amount in both pools, which is one of the reasons I really like working here. But this is just to give you a sense of when we looked at kind of some of the admitted students to Brown University, we just randomly chose this, and I just randomly chose this for the slides. There's no rhyme or reason. These were the admission nutrients that were showing up in their applications when we kind of did a little audit and looked through all of their application components, their activities list, their additional information section, their supplemental essays. And as you can see, the majority of these qualities are present, but there are things like collaboration that weren't, as I mentioned before, as explicitly mentioned. So just some key takeaways to think about as you start to step into your process, start to think about what should go where in your college application in this whole book. You want to make sure that those varied attributes are present somewhere across the board. It's not like you have to have every single one of these things to be admitted to college. These just tend to be the qualities that are most voiced by colleges of things that they consider to be positive character attributes. As I mentioned before, you want to research individual colleges and make sure that you're in alignment with their missions as well. And again, like lastly, I just want to make that plug for that collaboration point because, and when I say collaboration, I don't just mean I've been involved in a group project. What I really mean is that you understand the value of working with people who come from different walks of life, who have different skill sets, who have different skills. I'm sure you've all been on projects where maybe you were like the deep researcher and there was someone else who was synthesizing things and making them look pretty in a slide format that you presented, right? Everyone has a contribution, everyone has a voice and a story to share. And the more that you can acknowledge that you're down for that, colleges want to make sure that when you're on your campus, you are going to be that type of person, because those are the people in the real world who are making a difference. Okay. This is just briefly to mention that there are also some micronutrients, and again, things that, also colleges look for. But the 5 that I mentioned previously are the ones that I'd say are the most distilled. They're the macronutrients, the ones that, like, protein, carbs, fat. These are maybe things like magnesium and, kind of some of those additional things that are really nice to include if they really resonate with you. And say you're an artist or a dancer, obviously creativity is a great thing that colleges value. They'd love to hear about your creative side. But it's not necessarily, the end all be all. If all these things are not included in your application, you only have so many words and so many spaces. All right, so for the rest of the session, I'm going to be focusing on these 3 different application components beyond your personal statement: the activities list, the additional information section, which has some hot off the press changes that we're going to inform you about, and the supplemental essays that are typically required by more selective colleges. And it's something that we really have a lot of amazing resources and guides on at College Essay Guide. All right, so first I want to get into something that is really common in the ecosphere on, again, Reddit, College Confidential, the interwebs, the Facebook, as Ethan mentioned before, more like the TikTok. And it's this culture about, like, the essay that got me into. These videos are very clickbaity, right? It's a headline that people, I think this guy, the second one here, Quan, he writes literally in the corner on his art, "Fake crying for clickbait." It's so ridiculous, the things that we do for likes. But this, in my opinion, is a misconception and a misalignment of the admission process, right? There are times where students are admitted in spite of having fine essays. You want to make your essays and application the best that they can be, but I also just want to remind you that these don't make up for every single part of the college application. There are things that are happening behind the scenes that influence why certain students are admitted and other students are not. And they're oftentimes things that are outside of your control. So I just don't want you to think that, of course, this is the thing you have the most control over at this stage. We want you to do the best you can here, but don't just think that, oh, I got straight D's and C's all through high school, I'm going to really knock it out of the park with my essays, and they're going to get me into the school. It's a yes and. Yes, the essays can be helpful, and your academic foundation, these other components still need to be there as well. So I actually wanted to show you a little bit of, there's a lot of videos of students who actually request their admissions file when they enroll at a college or university. And depending on the college or university, there are some notes and ratings and things that the admissions officers left on files to give students a better sense of why they were admitted, that kind of like elusive mystery question. Because usually when you get an acceptance letter, it just says a lot of like generic, "You are amazing and you're so talented." But this actually shows students, and I'm not saying like everyone go and flood and email colleges to get your application. You have to, first of all, be enrolled at a college to do this. But I just want to show you a little clip of a student and some of the notes that were on her file for Yale and the things that the admission officer pointed out in her essays, because it's a really good learning moment for you about what really matters and how an admissions officer is thinking about these components.
From my reader 1, and now let's move on to the essay comments. They basically wrote 1 or 2 sentences about each essay, summarizing it and then giving like their personal thoughts. Like for E1, which is my Common App essay, they basically summarized it saying, "Tweaking herbal remedies with mom, a metaphor for celebrating her Chinese heritage. Millie expresses the nuances of her relationship to culture quite well, writing is confident with a nice touch of humility." And then they have CD, which I think is my extracurricular essay.
It's not the extracurricular essay. It's an essay that they asked about a COVID response. We're going to get into this in a minute, but it's been repackaged for 2025. But she notes on the screen that she didn't know what they were talking about because it's all written in like shorthand and like abbreviations, but it's her COVID interruption essay.
That is a Yale supplemental essay. COVID era Asian violence inspired Millie to create Youth Against Hate, which has become a successful organization. They also have YY, which I believe is why Yale essay. That's like why this college. Every single college application has YYGS and Yale China Association's Public Resources Fellowship, New Haven AAPI Community. This is convincing. This is convincing. It seems like what they're doing is just like giving a summary in general of what I wrote in my essay, and then their end of like what they personally think and whether it's good or bad. Like, this is convincing.
So it's funny, I wouldn't actually use the words good or bad, but the notes that she shared on the screen and the kind of takeaways from her essays really give you a sense that, again, the admission officer is not writing paragraphs about the syntax and the prose in this essay was not to my liking. They really are just giving the main idea of what the essay is about so that their colleagues can see it in an admissions committee setting. And they're giving their take on, is this essay in alignment with the things that we're looking for in our students? So for example, you know, her talking about her work combating Asian violence during the COVID pandemic is a reflection of kind of, they wrote, this is convincing. And my interpretation of that as a former admissions officer is they, you know, she mentioned the impact, the numbers of students that she was able to reach with these initiatives online. And it's compelling, it's convincing, it's really showing me these qualities of initiative and impact. It's showing me the admission nutrient of leadership and or initiative. I'm really getting that sense from this. So that's kind of where the essays come into play. It's not, again, a huge rubric that's really kind of taking up all of your time. This is just to give you a sense of, as I mentioned before, there are things that are happening behind the scenes at colleges that influence why certain students are admitted and not others are not admitted. And these are just some examples of some of the things that do come into play to an admissions process. So if, for example, there's someone in your hometown or nearby who's like, hey, you know, I don't know how they got in, or I don't know how this person didn't get in. They're so talented. It often has to do with these things here on the screen and the student just not aligning with what the college was looking for that particular year. This is just to kind of give you another just takeaway that, again, I'm informing you about this information to be real with you and to be honest about how admissions decisions are really made and some of these things that are happening behind the scenes. The chart that I showed you earlier with, you know, what colleges are looking for, those are the things that you have more control over, especially the things in green, positive character attributes, your essay, your interest in attending. But a lot of these institutional priorities, you can definitely, you know, be aware of maybe. So for example, if you're from California and you're applying to a bunch of colleges that are in California, private colleges, you are going to be the majority of the applicant pool there. Most of the students applying are from California, and a college wants students from all 50 states. So maybe it's a good idea, if you're comfortable, looking at some schools that are further away from home where you're not going to be the majority of the applicant pool. So you have a little bit more from a supply and demand standpoint. You're providing something new and something different in the college's application pool from a fact sheet alone. I want to kind of point out just as well, this fourth bullet here, that is sometimes these institutional priorities are reflected in a college's reading process. So this next clip I'm about to show you is an example of a student who was admitted to Stanford University, go Trees. And you can hear, actually, he was admitted in the end, but listen to what he talks about, the comments about his essay on his application when he asked to review it when he enrolled.
Apps also have SPIV, CAPE, which I'm pretty sure is my Common App personal essay. I actually wasn't able to write down that many notes for this, but from what I remember, my first application reader thought that my Common App essay was okay. And for IVE, which I'm pretty sure is my intellectual vitality essay, they said that I had nice synthesis. They also wrote WM. I'm not exactly sure what WM stands for, but next to it, it says family game night. So I'm assuming it was my essay about family game night. And for that essay, my reader wrote that it was just fine. I also have a summary from my first application reader. They wrote, not jumping off the page, on the fence. This is a tough one. But they also wrote that my intended major leans in my favor and the different parts of my application come together and keep me in the running. See you.
So remember what I said about the essay that got me into? Sometimes students are admitted in spite of fine essays because of other reasons. So I just want you to be aware that that is the reality of how college admissions works. This is another video of that for the sake of time. I just want to show you. All right, but let's focus on the things you can control. Number one, your activities list. So on the Common Application, which is how most of the US colleges, private schools are on this particular application type. You put together one application and it's sent to a bunch of different colleges. And on the Common App itself, you'll see different tabs. So one will be the My Colleges tab, where you can put in all the colleges that you're interested in. Another will be, there's actually a financial aid tab, and the Common App has done a really good job of advertising resources, scholarships, ways to think about aid when it comes to making college more affordable. But the Common Application tab is one that is these are written pieces of your application that are sent to every school. The My Colleges section is where you might see some of those college-specific supplemental essays. Some of the students in the video that you saw before were mentioning some of those things, like the Why Yale essay. Why do you want to go to Yale? Or the Stanford roommate essay was what the other student was mentioning, or where he wrote about family game night, I think was his community essay. But the activities list is going to be sent to every college you apply to. And these are the things that they are asking for when you are going to go into that page, and it's going to ask you, what type of activity is it? You're going to have a list of, things like social justice, or, STEM, or professional. You're going to have the position or title. So you can write member if you're a member, if you're president, if you're co-captain. You can also write, for example, if you started off as a member, but you became secretary, you can write member, parentheses 9, secretary, parentheses 10 through 12. Organization name, this is often going to be your high school if you're writing about a high school specific activity. But say you did a research project that was off campus, or you're involved in your newspaper in your hometown for like the teen writers section, you would put the name of what that organization is for the organization name. You can also leave that blank sometimes, because I believe it's an optional field. Timing and duration. Please listen to me very clearly. The most questions that Ethan's going to get in the course are, I did band camp for 2 hours in the summer in 10th grade, and then I did it for 5 hours in the spring semester, but only. Just do an average. The person in admissions that's reading through your application so quickly, they just want to get a ballpark figure and a sense for how you spend your time. Is it 30% robotics, 10% home responsibilities, 20% research, 10% French club? They just want to know the general sense of where you're spending your time outside the classroom. So when you're doing the hours per week and weeks per year, just do the average, just put it in for the best math that you can. If math is not your thing, you're among friends, and move on. Because really, the more time you spend fretting about this, the less time you can actually put together a great application. There's also going to be a question that asks you, are you continuing this in college? And for most of you, you're just going to write no, or yes or no. But I would just say to put yes for pretty much all of them, because ideally, you want to continue the things that you spend your time doing when you're in college. And no one's really going to be looking at that part too much. Another thing that students overthink about is, you don't have 10 activities. Is that going to hurt my chances? No. Most students, I would say, Common App has actually shown data that most students put together 5 to 7 activities on their list. And some of this also includes activities that you did in 9th and 10th grade that you're not maybe doing anymore. It's totally fine to not have all 10 things filled in. And I would say most students have about 3 to 4 core activities, including students who are admitted to highly rejective or highly selective colleges. Another question that Ethan and we get a lot is, should you put things in the activities section or the honors or awards section? In general, honors or awards that are academic can go in the honors and awards section. But activities, it really doesn't matter as much where you put things. The admission officer just wants to know this information, and wherever you can fit it into your application that makes sense, use the spaces allotted to you as wisely as possible and try to follow directions as best you can. Don't stress too much about this. They're not grading you on, I can't believe you put an award in the activities list. I've never done that as an admission officer. I don't know anyone who has. And if they are, jokes on them. Okay, these are the 3 tips I want to leave you with your activities list before moving on to the next section. Number 1, pack the space with pride and personality. As you can see, I like alliteration and assonance, which is repeated vowel sounds. Number 2, determine whether or not you need to explain or establish your activity. And number 3, prioritize initiative and impact with your descriptions. All right, so number 1, pride and personality. This is an actual example of a activities list I got from one student I read at Holy Cross. He wrote one thing, basketball, self-explanatory for the description, where he had 150 characters to talk about what this was. Missed opportunity, young man. I want to know, on the basketball team, which, yes, I know what that is. I know it's self-explanatory. I want to know, how do you show up on that team? What kind of player are you? What kind of teammate are you? What's your contribution, right? So this description here is much more effective at communicating the questions that I have as an admissions officer, right? You can mention, when it comes to pride and personality, you can mention something like, we're on a really strong team. In this case, it's the PIAA championship winning team. It's okay to highlight and kind of like give yourself a pat on the back for some of the praise, the gold stars, the trophies that you've won along the way. But that shouldn't be your entire application. You should also include some moments of lightness, of, mirth, of joy. So this, example here of replacing, treating teammates to new baking attempts post-game, replacing our lost sugar and salt. What I gather from the student as a community member and their roles and identities is that they are a mother. They're like the mother hen of the team. And they're also creative in terms of like trying new recipes and baking. So from this description alone, even though, yes, it's basketball, and I know what that is, I now know so much more about the student from so few words alone. Sometimes students wonder, can I be like more like jokey, cutesy kind of personality-ish in your activities list and in your application? Absolutely, you definitely can. I'd say with limits, right? You don't want everything in your application to be a joke. You want to take seriously the things that you're really seriously proud of. But there are so many spaces in your application to make these kind of personality flexes. And especially if this is your tone of voice, if this is kind of the person that you are known to be in the school, make sure that your activities list reflects that. So the person reading it gets to know you as quickly as they can, and gets a sense for who you are beyond just the plain resume version. Speaking of which, number 2, I want you to think about explaining versus establishing your activities. So an activity that you want to explain is one that, say, for example, there's an Alpa Cares Club at your school where you help raising money for alpacas who have alopecia. That's a very niche specific example. Someone who reads Alpa Cares as the organization name probably isn't going to know what that means. So that might be an activity where you use the description just to explain what it actually is, the plain description. But most students' activities lists are a blend of those explained activities and the ones where they're establishing their role. They're establishing who they are. Just like the example that I shared before with the baker. And in this case, I have another example about the mom, putting Band-Aids on, and maybe you're the one who puts the hype playlist together on the ride to academic decathlon competitions, right? Whatever it may be, just try to think about the buried details of your activities that wouldn't be so obvious. And lastly, prioritizing initiative and impact. So a lot of times, for example, you saw the student before, Millie, she mentioned, she did these initiatives that come to address awareness about Asian American violence against Asian Americans. She mentioned that reached 10,000 students online, all of her initiatives combined. That's a good idea if you have kind of any receipts, any quantifiables, any tangible sense of the impact and the ripple effect of your work when it comes to your extracurriculars. That's a really great way to kind of show admissions officers that you're impacting not just, it's great, of course, to impact things on the local level, people in your school, your friends. But ideally, if you have especially experiences where there has been a wider impact beyond just the immediate home, your school walls, it's great to be able to communicate how far the reach of the work that you've done has gone. All right. Second section that we're going to cover as we move through the webinar is the additional information section. So this is something that I've been talking a lot about the common application because that's the most typical application type. But this is something that also is available on the QuestBridge application, which is an application exclusively for low-income students, and things like the University of California application. So basically, it's a space where you can say, some of the things that you had in your activities list, you're like, I can't believe I only was given 150 characters for this. I started this from the ground up. It was a seedling, and now it's become a whole jungle. I want to give credit for the amazing work that I've done over time and kind of show someone in admissions the progression of my work. Cue the additional information section. This is a great way to be able to shine light on activities that you want to elaborate on, maybe some extenuating circumstances as well about your dips in grades. Potentially, maybe you were sick, you had mono, so you had a rougher and rockier sophomore year than the rest of your school experience. These are all things that can kind of be elaborated on in your additional information section. It's completely optional, so you do not need to fill this out. And this year, it's also condensed. It previously used to be 650 words, just like the common application, but now it's actually about 300 words for this particular very open-ended section alone. However, hot off the press, and once the common application goes live for you all as juniors, come August 1st, you're going to notice that there's 2 sections now. There's there once was a section called community disruption. It was what Millie referred to as the COVID essay that she completed. It's now being renamed as the Challenges and Circumstances essay. And it's a 250-word section where you can mention anything that has impacted your involvement, kind of extenuating circumstances. So, you know, these all might be things that you may want to include. Look at these like happy, collaborative students helping each other out with their college applications. We love to see it. These might be things that you might want to include in that new challenge section. And again, these are sections that you may very well be leaving blank. But especially if you have the chance to use this for something, you may want to think about some of the things that maybe you do want to give a little more airtime to. I would say probably this new challenge section is the one that is going to be left not as filled out as the optional, completely additional info, anything goes section really. But these are kind of some of the things that you may want to include in your challenges section. We have a whole guide on our website about how to do this. And of course, the course, if you sign up with Ethan, will kind of give you a little more specifics and examples about this. But these are just some examples of what you might want to include there. For the additional information section, again, as I mentioned before, like elaborating on your activities, things like that. These are all things that you can include in your additional info section. Say you are in an international baccalaureate diploma or an AP capstone course. That might be something that you want to share about that deep dive project that you've done. That would be an example of the admission nutrient called, wait for it, intellectual curiosity, right? Colleges are really curious about that. They're curious about curiosity. Alliteration, yet again. So with this additional information section, again, it's really up to you how you use it. Here is a little bit of don'ts when it comes to this section. A lot of students are wondering, you know, can I write a whole second personal statement in here? No, you really can't, because the additional information section is now 650 words. So this wouldn't really be a good use of your time as a whole additional life story, and you just don't have the room here. Try not to be as duplicitous with your information as well. You want to be able to make sure that this information is something new that they maybe aren't going to be hearing in a more elaborated state elsewhere. You also don't want to go really too far into like the complaining, excusing, finger pointing type of energy, because I actually had firsthand experience this with a chemistry teacher of mine in high school. Miss Mariani, if you're still out there, I'm coming for you. I'm just kidding. Life goes on. I buried the hatchet. But when I was in her class, actually, she would constantly call out for me for questions I would ask that she thought I was trying to be like a class clown, but I genuinely just didn't know the answer because chemistry was not really my gig. So I do feel like that kind of like had an impact on the way that our relationship was. But of course, it's not a really good look to be like, Miss Mirani had it out for me in your college application, because the person in admissions doesn't understand the nuance of that dynamic and hasn't seen it firsthand. So it oftentimes just looks like you're making excuses for something instead of taking ownership of something that you've gone through. If you had challenging courses, you can mention you had a difficult relationship with the teacher. You tried to make it work by maybe going to office hours, going to extra help. And in the end, you're proud of kind of rebounding the way you did, but you know, now you have learned your lesson and you're going to, you know, keep moving on. That's something that I think you can really, anchor your statement on and not have it be this finger pointy thing. Try also not to get too technical. Some of you might be like, oh, in my activities list, I've done research on this really cool C. elegans research of snail mites zotes, you know, it gets very technical for an admission reader who is a generalist, who's reading for all different types of majors and programs. And many of them, in terms of their own educational background, are not subject area experts in CRISPR and coding languages and things like that. So you kind of want to make sure that you're giving the kind of like boiled down, like just like with newspapers, they actually write them at a 5th grade level, because that is the way that most people are going to be able to gain the key insights and takeaways from the stories that are there. So don't get way too over in the weeds technical. You only have 300 words to elaborate on this activity. And not doing that is going to not really put your best foot forward. So for the sake of time, I'm just going to move through this slide here, but these are just some tips from some wonderful people in our ecosphere. So Susan Tree, who's one of our wonderful college counselors at College Essay Guy. She's really big on, of course, you know, you've probably heard this word a million times, being authentic in your application. And I like this tip from Michelle Rasick. She is an awesome college counselor who has really produced some great work for us at College Essay Guy in terms of blogs and guides for students. She's a college counselor in a high school, and she says, even though sometimes I'm writing about some of these things, these challenges, grade dips, etc., in a student's recommendation letter, colleges really value hearing them in your own words, in your own voice. So, this might be an area, I mentioned like don't duplicate information. Don't duplicate information that you wrote. It's okay to mention things that are mentioned in your recommendation letter again, especially if the school is giving their side of how things went, and then you're giving kind of your firsthand eyewitness account as a primary source, as the main character to what happened there. And this is a sample additional info section where a student kind of talks about making a documentary about snowmaking. That was a big passion project that they worked on. For the sake of time, I'm not going to read through it here, but it will be available in the slides for you to take a look at and potentially get some takeaways there. All right, lastly, we're going into supplemental essays, which I'm not going to cover too much in depth. And you might be like, wait a minute, like I thought this was going to be all about supplemental essays. You are a high school junior right now. These essays will not be available fully until August 1st. The colleges put together their new essay prompts and release them at that point. So this is not a good area for you to be spending your time right now. What is a good idea is to start thinking about and understand the general buckets of what these questions are, and start to think about some experiences from high school that may make sense for these supplemental essays. But don't go to the point of like writing them all out now. Focus on the big kind of macro level stuff, the personal statement, the activities list, the additional information section. That's being sent everywhere. These are going to be ad hoc, college-specific questions. And unlike the common application, where you can pretty much write any essay about yourself or your personal statement, and any of the prompts that are listed in there will count, or you can just always choose topic of your choice, pay really good attention to the wording of these essay prompts from these individual colleges. They are very specific for a reason, and oftentimes they're very much tied to a college's admission process, what they're looking for in students, their own mission, vision, and values, their own special admissions nutrients beyond the general ones that we've shared with you. So familiarizing yourself with things like those mission statements, those strategic plans, are going to help you make a case for how here's all the amazingness that I bring to the table, and here's all the things that you have that are part of your campus. Here's why we're a great fit for each other. Here is why we're going to make magic together, and how I'm coming in with some stuff and I'm going to take it to the next level at your school by taking advantage of this research lab that's with the professor in your neuroscience department that I really love because it focuses on infant neuroscience. The more specific you can get with kind of like digging deeper into syllabi for colleges, understanding who they are, understanding what they're all about, and making the case for how you align with their mission and values, that is going to give yourself the best chance for writing supplemental essays that really stand out. So I just described what's a really common essay called the Why Us essay. These other essays that are on the screen here are also pretty common too. So something like diversity and community, that's a really big one that's coming up a lot in recent years with colleges and universities. And you can write about anything here. You can write about race, gender, you can write about sexual orientation, you can write about things that are not related to kind of like demographic identities. You can write about being a tinkerer or being a collaborator, right? Those roles and identities that we encourage students to do can also be included there as well. The last kind of just like tidbit of information that I want to leave to you before passing the mic back to Ethan for some announcements about his courses is that there is a strategy that we're really big on at College Essay Guide called the Super Essay Strategy. And this is basically where once the prompts are released August 1st, what you want to do is put them all into this thing called an essay tracker. I don't know if I actually skipped past that. It should be in here. Where is it? This is it. This essay tracker, which again is going to be included in the slides that you'll have going forward, is a way for you to put in your essay prompts and categorize them by what type of essay they are. It's a really good idea to do this once when the prompts are released. And you can go ahead and filter and see, okay, 8 out of the 10 schools that I'm applying to are asking an essay about community in some way. Maybe one of them phrases it as describe a community and your place within it. And maybe another college says, tell us about something meaningful to you and why. And maybe the thing that's meaningful to you is a community that you're a part of. And maybe another college asks you a question like share a perspective you bring or experiences you've had to help us understand you better. These are all examples of previous supplemental essay prompts at University of Michigan, Duke, and Stanford. And it's very possible to, again, I told you, pay attention to the wording of these essays. It is very possible with the way that these are worded to write an essay that could count for all of these schools. So this is an example, again, that you'll have in the slides going forward of a super essay. This is an essay actually about football and a community a student is a part of, which on the surface is kind of like a common community. But he talks a lot more about how football has kind of taught him more about stepping away from what he considers to be toxic masculinity, and some of the ways that kind of like he projects that outside of the football team, as well as some of the things that has really done in terms of benefiting his life and showing up for one another. So that will be an example of an essay that answers, describe a community with your place within it, something meaningful to you, and a perspective or experiences that you bring. So that's a good idea to reduce the amount of work that you're kind of stepping into when you are putting together your whole college application. This probably sounds like a lot. And I want to toss the mic back to Ethan, who can share with you, if it does sound like a lot, we have lots of ways to kind of help you, guide you step by step to make it feel a little less burdensome.
Tom, look how many questions I answered. Can you see in the Q&A?
I
You
can't
can't?
see.
It's 117. We did okay.
Oh
Thanks for
my
bringing
God, I
it
don't know how you did it. I don't know how you did it.
Thanks. Well, yeah, if you wouldn't mind maybe just clicking the first link, I'd love to just scroll a little
Sure.
bit through this page. Thanks. So I've got this first course I wanted to tell you all about, and we're going to do all the giveaways here in just a minute. But this first course is on how to write a personal statement. We're going to spend a month together, essentially on sessions like this. I'm going to walk you through step by step how to brainstorm. And Tom, you can just kind of scroll down, I guess, if you like, how to brainstorm your personal statement. How do you find a topic that's going to help you stand out? All the sessions are live. You can watch the recording if you can't attend live. And as you'll see there, we start in about a month. We're going to get into outlining and writing, and then revising, and then finally, how do you know your personal statement's actually doing its job? I'm going to give lots and lots of, we do this game called Is This a Good Topic or Not? So you'll see me revise like some of y'all's, not everybody's, of course, but some of y'all's sessions live so you can kind of see how the process goes. And you'll see some like cool, nice things that people have said. We'll share the link in the chat right now so you can sign up. And besides that, we roll right into, it's kind of like we used to do two separate courses, but we've kind of made them a one big sequence. And thanks, Tom. The way you scrolled through was beautiful. That was great. We do another course right after that, and it's basically all the other parts of the application. So getting into the specifics of the activities list, I'll show you great examples. I'll answer all your questions about what goes there. What do you put in the additional info section? We've got tons of sample essays. I'm going to talk to you about how to write an awesome why us essay and how to write the identity essay, and we've got, if you'll see it, pause there for 1 second, actually, you'll see that we've got tons and tons of different sample essays for pretty much all the ones that you'll be working with, and just tons and tons of questions. So usually I get to at least, I don't know, somewhere between 20 to 50 questions on each of these sections. And yeah, that's sort of the thing. The goal is by the end of these 2 months, you'll have hopefully finished a solid draft, because we basically do the supplemental essays course right when those are released, so you can ask questions about your actual essays that you're working on. Although I'm already going to be covering the major essays. Last year we did these courses separately, and we charged $297 each. This year we're kind of putting them together. We're reducing the cost. And next slide, please. We've also added a couple things. I've improved the brainstorming exercises, especially on the personal statement end a little bit. We've also added a couple sessions where you're going to get essay review sessions with some of my coaches, which is pretty cool. I've got an awesome coaching team, so you'll get to ask them, is this a good topic or not? And what do you think of this?
Mhm.
And they'll be reviewing somewhere between, usually, I mean, it's, on the low end, it's like 3 essays. On the higher end, sometimes we get to like, 7 or 8 essays. It sort of depends on how fast we're moving through those.
Yeah.
And then,
And there's smaller sessions than these webinars, so you do get a lot more chances to have that more individualized feedback.
yeah, totally. And then the first 100 folks who sign up are going to have a separate session with us. That's a smaller session where we're calling it Inside College Admissions. That's with Tom and me, and we'll answer all of your really, really specific questions. And, we're saying more than 50 questions. I mean, that means you'll probably get multiple questions answered on that session. In addition to that, we've also got like tons and tons of practical tools. You've got something called the Choose Your Own Adventure essay tool that'll get you basically answer all of your questions when it comes to personal statements. And you've got access to that for a full year. And yeah, so it's pretty much the best, most efficient version of this. We've dropped the cost to $450. And then for those of you who are attending this webinar, we're going to do 20% off but before midnight, if you sign up before midnight tomorrow, so for the next like, what is it, like 17, 19 hours, if you sign up, you can get them for even cheaper if you use the code webinar20. So if you want, we'd love to have you join us. And yeah, what else? I'm trying to remember what slide is after this. I can't remember off the top of my head. Is this it? Well, thanks, friends, for being here, and thanks, Tom, for just giving all the goodness and such a beautiful shout out to those slides. They're just like, I don't know.
Oh,
Tom
thank
always
you.
brings it with the slides. We hope this was helpful for y'all, and we've got new and more content coming out, podcast, YouTube, social media, and all the things. And again, we've got that link to, check us out on the if you go to that our webinars page, which we'll follow up with in the email, come and join us on the next session. Well, happy Thursday.
Amazing.
And thanks again, Tom, for being awesome. And thanks for our awesome moderators, Rebecca and John. And yeah, we'll see you all on the next one. Peace.